gang. And Ofwono Opondo is in the house. Typically, he's already started with Star Cafe goodies. We have missed you, and clearly you've missed us as well.
Yeah, I've missed you, gang, and of course our listeners. I think you have also missed me.
We have missed you.
Yeah, but I've been, I thought I should go and do farming.
Yeah.
I'm on Mulanda and Kapele Bion. With this rain, I am planting. I'm doing my 150th acre of forest.
Wow. And I should say, the way you're dressed, you're superb. Very smart. I'm sure you didn't buy that shirt. And
that's very unusual of you. A compliment on my dressing. But as you know, I'm aging with good daughters.
Yes. This is clear.
The daughters keep bring back good.
Very, very clear that your daughters have done a good job. And I like the what do they call that? I have Nicholas up here in the studio. What do they? Is that a jumper? What do they call it?
Chest warmer.
Chest warmer. Yeah. So you're most welcome back to gang. You're looking superb. Looks like your farming is also working on you.
You know, when you are a farmer, you do what we call from garden to the plate.
Garden to the plate.
And you do a lot of physical work.
Yes.
So you trim the body.
Yeah.
The noise, the pollution of Kampala. We don't have it in the Kampala.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, having a week when you're not in a car. You don't drive.
Walking around.
You're walking around, yes.
Yeah. Have you brought us some pawpaws today?
No, I came from Kapelebyong Street. If I had passed Mulanda,
you'd have carried some, because those pawpaws are also delicious.
Yeah, thank you.
People at home know you, Ofwono Opondo, because of the potatoes you bring, the pawpaws you bring.
Thank you.
Yes, in the studio I have Angelo Izama. Most welcome to gang, Angelo. Yes, and we met in the week. We had a Chigo Thinkers session on ERA, Electricity Regulation Authority, introducing UEDCL. Great discussion.
That is really,
lot of hope.
Yeah, it was very optimistic, considering that, as I told that audience, after 20 years of Umeme, I was confident that the experiment had sort of succeeded. So I was skeptical about returning that concession to a government parastatal, but it appears like the regulator has learned some lessons. So we look forward to holding them to account.
Yeah. You were not as hopeful as they were. And a lot of people that watch the whole session on television are also a little bit skeptical. So it's down to ERA to make it work.
Indeed.
And they made some promises that we should see in a month, maybe, when they connect people who've not been connected and so on.
Well, since we have the deck stacked with lawyers today, you know, I think how eventually the government manages the buyout, I think that's a sticking point. The final figure will require some explaining, because it is considerably higher than what has been discussed in Parliament. But I think that the 2 points that I had issue with, one, whether the tariff will be used to grant UEDCL some leg room, you know, to reinvest in the network. The regulator says there's 100 million already provided for in the next year for reinvestment. And then, of course, having sat on this side of supervising a government agency myself, I know how Byzantine or even just crazy procurement procedures are in the government system, procurement and recruitment. So if they can give UEDCL some special consideration on how to procure, maybe under private sector rules, I think that's going to work out well. But I was speaking to a friend of mine, a subject matter expert on this, and he said that what the Parliament should consider really he's bringing a law that just governs how government parastatals will work. So you don't do it just for, New Vision or UDCL, but you create a special provisions law that says if you're a government company, you can operate under private sector principles. Yeah. So that may be the direction to go, Oscar.
KCL is always complaining that they don't have money, and yet they are big collectors. Anyway, we shall see. Nicholas Opio, a real pleasure having you on Gang. The last time I spoke to you, which is probably a couple of years ago, you were thinking about going to exile. You had been imprisoned. Your car had been vandalized.
Actually, I don't see Nicholas since he fled.
Since he fled.
I spoke to him on phone.
Yes.
Oscar,
that's the time I saw it. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was seated here in the Gang chair, and I saw you on television and said, the man is back. And that's the reason. And then you've been on social media as well. So welcome back.
Thank you, Oscar. Many people have characterized my hiatus out of the country in many ways. Exile, he has fled. To flee means you're running away from something.
Yeah.
Really, Oscar, I hadn't fled.
You were running away from those people who arrested you?
Not necessarily. I had confronted my problems with the courts.
Yeah.
The state had withdrawn all the charges against me, and I thought it was time to go away and do something else.
Wow.
So I left the country really at my own will, voluntarily, and spent 2.5 years away. But I'm glad to be back.
Yeah,
I'm glad to be back.
And that car, did you offload it? The one that they...
No. Eventually, when they gave back the vehicle, we took the decision not to drive the car. We sold it off, and the dealer, I think it is Kia Motors Uganda, were very generous to take it back and give us another car.
Wow,
but what I must tell you, Oscar,
introduce me to them.
No, what I must tell you, two things. First is that, when they arrested me, I had some money on me. It was about $10,000. And every single coin of that money was returned to me a year and a half later.
Wow.
It was quite surprising that a police system, a military system like that would keep that money and give it back to me. But also, Oscar, I really was...
I hope you don't carry that money with you anymore.
Maybe not.
You can ask Koja Segona.
Yeah.
But I hope Nicholas will use his experience to ask his young brother Semakade to come back.
Yeah.
Semakade is a different issue altogether. But I must tell you, Oscar, the second thing is when I was away, I lost my dad. And one of the very first people to call me to commiserate with me was OO. Really, he was the very first person to call me on a video call, on a very bad line, but I got the message. So I just want to say thank you all. Even though he has blocked me on Twitter.
He has a nice side. For us who know him, he has a nice side. Then I have
and Nicholas has now that has raised it publicly. I'm going to unblock him.
What did you do? We have our heated moments.
Yeah. And when you come to Gang, we start with peace talks, and I don't know it's going to end, but here we are. And Agatha Atuhaire, you're holding the trenches now that Nicholas is back. Nicholas, Agatha has represented you well. You're most welcome to Gang alone.
But Nicholas has been back for a long time, though. I even didn't know that you guys were talking about. Yeah, I am.
Welcome to Gang.
Yes,
Agatha.
I'm glad to be on the Gang again.
Yes.
Thanks, Oscar.
And then we have a guest, Mr. Howard Mwesigwa, a lawyer of Kali Kumutima Law Advocates.
Okay, so Oscar, I'm a lawyer at Kali Kumutima and Company Advocates of the Environment. So my name is Howard, as you've introduced me. I'm so glad to be here.
Howard Mwesigwa.
Howard Mwesigwa, yes. This is my debut here, so I'm really glad to be joining the gangsters. I lead a department at Kali Kumutima and Company Advocates, a department on energy, environment, and sustainability.
Yeah.
Probably the only law firm that has that kind of department.
Indeed.
Yes. So
Ofwono Opondo asked that all that man is going to talk about environment, and I told him he even writes about it because I spotted your article in in Sunday Monitor.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm very passionate about the environment, and most importantly, the right to a clean and healthy environment, which is embedded in Article 39 of our Constitution.
Wow.
But also, when you look at the framework that we have, the National Environment Act, which is now Chapter 181 of our laws, and in 2021, we also took a very bold step and enacted the National Climate Change Act, which is now Chapter 182 of our laws. And we have a number of other principal legislations that I will be getting into, and subsidiary legislations as well. But also, we are doing this in the grander scheme of the imperative behind the call for sounder environmental governance, but also climate action. And we'll get into that eventually, but there's also a pressing call for sustainable cities and communities, especially under SDG number 11, but also seeing how, of course, the Agenda 2030, even in NDP4, I've seen there's a major emphasis on that. The ATMs, that's really the pillars, but there's a major focus there on climate change. And even now, we're getting into the nationally determined contributions. Now we're getting to the third phase, which is NDC 3.0. So all these sound like a lot of jargons, but I'll be looking forward, Oscar, to demystifying some of them, and also the topic we'll be having on floods as well. Yeah. So thank you for having me, Oscar.
Thank you. You know, once told me, it was like an accusation, you like young people. And I told Ofwono Opondo that I'm a teacher. So my job is to...
Oscar.
And his entire government hate young people.
And his entire government hate young people.
Oscar, that can't be accurate. I am the one who has been recommending to you young people who can replace us on the gang. Starting with Semujo.
Yeah, it is true.
Yes.
It is true. But now we have younger people. I even sent one letter to you for extra mentorship.
Yes, I even recommended another young one, Natif. Yeah. So I can't be against young people. I have young people in my house. But anyway, I can now report I have unblocked Mr. Nicholas.
Thank you very much. Thank you, really. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your mediation, Oscar.
Yeah. So, Abdul Katuntu is a little bit late, but well before discussions of, what has been presented in the last few days, he had been arguing against judges about bail and money. So, Angelo, I introduced him. Angelo. He's saying, yes, we even talked about electricity. In Kapalabyong, you don't have electricity, so it did not spark.
No, we have, but connectivity is extremely low. Yeah, I think the government needs to now put some money to connect people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next time we talk electricity, I will invite you. But in the meantime, Howard, feel free. Star Cafe goodies are here. Yeah. Just follow OO's.
When I walked in, I said I can say Museveni's rising middle class. I found them in the lobby, and all of them had good jackets on, well-trimmed hair, specs on their eyes, and each one had a mug of coffee.
I must apologize to the lady at the back there who always chastises me for bringing my own coffee. I came too early.
But we shall enjoy Star Cafe.
Now, Oscar, thank you for the invitation. You know, I've been an ardent fan and follower of the Capital Gang, so I've been looking forward to the Star Cafe. I would just hear you talking about it. So today, getting to partake is such a privilege. Thank you.
And on a day of Ofwono Opondo is there, we bring out his special mug, a large cup of coffee. So he's there, and I hope you've not carried a chapati. There's a general who carried a chapati too. He carries a chapati all his meetings. So here we are safe. So let's start with you, Agatha, the lady in the studio. Abdul was shouting out a lot about bail. And then we have Aaron Kiza. He's given bail because the court martial was closed. It's still closed so far for civilian cases. But then charged
20 million shillings.
Was that surprising?
Isn't it better for his lawyer to be the one to start here?
Let me start with an independent person.
Okay. I am an independent person. Ofwono doesn't believe it, but it's true.
Actually, I might have made a mistake. Let me start with an interested person. Agatha, right?
Independent is it. So, One, I am glad that the MPs have started to talk about this, albeit too late. I don't know where they were before this. When the matched parliament happened in July last year, there was, I mean, the questions of bail and the exorbitant fees had been there, except that now it's much worse. But also, when citizens have not committed any crime, like when they're exercising their right to protest, like happened in the matched parliament, we had Kabumba, who had a very spirited campaign against that, because he's asking the judicial officers, why are you sending these young people to prison in the first place? Why do we need to pay bail for young people that were exercising their constitutional right? That campaign was there for a long time. I am glad that now the MPs used the chance of the judiciary budget scrutiny to raise this. So when the other day, I was not happy, and I was talking to Nicholas about that the day that Aaron was given bail. I did not see that as a win at all. Bail of 20 million shillings for a minor offense, very minor offense, contempt of court, where the accused had already served more than a quarter of it, but also where the Supreme Court had said that this court that in which they claim he was in contempt of is not a court of competent jurisdiction. And then he comes and the ruling is very good, but you're asking for bail of 20 million shillings. What precedent are you setting? How many people in this country can afford 20 million shillings? That's a very high price and a bad precedent you are setting for bail. But also, when I say how many people can afford it, even Aaron couldn't afford it. People had to come and contribute. So if you I don't know if you remember the bail for the FDC guys that were arrested in Kisumu. They were given bail of 2 million shillings each, but they were 36. So altogether, they were required to pay 72 million. They went to everyone asking for arms. Now, if you look at that and look at the finances of Ugandans, at the economic conditions in this country, that means that you will not have many people that can afford bail. It's a little wonder we have almost 50,000 people in jail on remand, because the bail conditions have become stringent. First, in terms of the fees that you're required to pay, but two, now you can even satisfy all the conditions of bail, like was in the case of Kizza Besigye the other day, and they still deny you bail. So what I think the conditions for bail need to be streamlined. Again, this whole discretion of judges is no longer working because they are abusing their discretionary powers. So I hope that the Abdu Katuntus and the rest of the team on the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, this is an issue they take seriously, even if it means Parliament amending the laws and us having a law that clearly stipulates who should get bail, how much they should pay, because someone getting up and saying 20 million or 50 million. I was asking the question, if you're asking 20 million from Aaron for contempt of court, how much will you ask from Besigye and Obedul Tale, who are accused of treason? So yeah, but in many ways, many people are saying, no, let's look at the fact that Aaron is out of jail. If it was Kizza Besigye, he would have refused to pay that money. They have ever given him bail of, was it 30 million? And he said no. He said, don't look for it. I would rather go back to jail, until they challenged it and it was reduced to 3 million. There was a case of Charles Onyango Bo and Andrew Mwenda. And Andrew Mwenda, where also bail was an issue, the amounts, and that was challenged. Why aren't we using those precedents that are there to stand and say these people cannot, it's really not right for us to do those things? But yes, like I said, I think Nicholas Opio should speak to specifically the Aaron's bail.
Yes, we don't have to just relate to Aaron Kizza's bail. But when I interviewed the judge, Chibita, quite a while ago when I was still doing television, he'd said at the time the period for being on remand, the average period for remand was 4 years. That's ridiculous.
But That's can't be true. The magistrates, the Chief Magistrates Act talks about pre-trial detention, and I think it's after 180 days someone qualifies for mandatory bail, but that is not even done in this country because no one even follows the law. Yes, so the 4 years, I don't know in what context Justice Chibita was talking about it.
He said it's not good, but that's what it was.
Let me give the people that are practicing the law to clarify on that.
We'll go to Nicholas. So, Nicholas Opio, were you surprised that, yes, Aaron Kiza got bail, but I don't know, just since we are mentioning him, shouldn't have been removing the conviction? I don't know what word to use.
So
quashing the conviction.
Yeah, setting aside the conviction.
Yes.
So as a practicing advocate, I'll be very careful here because I have to appear before judges and still argue Aaron's case. As you know, Aaron was only released on bail pending appeal. And that decision,
so the case is not dead?
No, not yet. It's a very live matter.
And the conviction ends when? Because is it 9 months?
We have filed an appeal against his conviction, and that appeal is yet to be heard. We have filed all written submissions, both the appellant, in this case Aaron Kiza, and the DPP, the respondent. We are now waiting for the court to give us a date to go and make our case, and for the court to give us a judgment.
Okay.
Our case is that Aaron's conviction was illegal. The sentence was an unlawful sentence, that the process of his conviction were in violation of his fair trial rights, and we hope that the court will agree with us. So, as I said, I'm a lawyer on that case.
Yeah, we can put that aside and go back to discussion on bail.
Yes, it's an active matter. I'll be very careful. The issue of bail, Oscar, has been a long-standing
So beginning
debate.
with that one, were you surprised that the bail was put at 20 million?
No, I wasn't surprised at all.
Really?
Because in my own case, the court gave me also a very high bail to pay, and I paid it. There have been many other cases.
In the past, they used to say things like 5 million non-cash. So
that's true. I think that for me, the issue is focusing on the amounts that the courts give as a condition for bail. Is to focus on the tree, not the forest. Because any person who is in jail really wants to come out and will do anything to get out.
But some people don't have 20 million, whatever they may do.
Most of them don't.
Yeah.
Most of them don't. But to focus on just the amount as opposed to the whole process is to miss the point. My view is that the whole debate about bail is much bigger than the terms of bail that courts are giving. And you have to go back and look at what I see as a prolonged campaign by a section of our leadership, especially President Museveni, against grant of bail for particular offences. For a very long time, President Museveni has mounted a campaign that sought to exclude certain people and certain crimes from accessing bail. He had limited success, but over a long period of time, you begin to see the effect of that campaign in the practice of bail in the courts, especially for people of particular crimes. The second thing is this, Oscar. You had a moment in time when the president's campaign was not being very successful. What he then embarked on was the use of brute force. So people are granted bail by the courts. He says, I don't care. He will rearrest them outside court and take them back to prison. There have been too many instances where people who are granted bail were rearrested by the establishment and taken back to either prisons or charged for other crimes. Now, what we are seeing, Oscar, is that they are now not relying on that sort of method anymore. That method became unpopular, and what
social media effects.
Yeah, what has now happened is that in order to placate the president, the Rules Committee of the Judiciary came up with what they call bail guidelines. Guidelines that are really inherently unconstitutional. that sought to even impose conditions for grant of bail in the rules, or what they call guidelines, in the hope that that will then solve the problem that President Museveni was really so riled against. Now, the application of those bail guidelines interfered with judicial discretion and began to limit judges on the parameters on which they can give bail, including going to the very detail of what it means to have a place of abode, what it means to be a person of good conduct. Those guidelines became very prescriptive to the extent that judges are now having to work within a very limited area of discretion in their decision for grant of bail. Now, the impact of that is now what you're seeing in the courts. The pressure mounted by the campaigns, the use of force to try and rearrest people who are granted bail, and the bail guidelines have now come to full effect. You have judges now really afraid to go beyond the parameters of the bail guidelines. The other thing, of course, is that you now have a condition in which judges are on really probation. In our case, we were lucky we got a judge who was not on probation. He had the courage to write the judgment that he wrote. But in the Besigye case, you have a judge who is on probation, who is having to hear a bail application from somebody accused of trying to kill the president. Such a judge is in a very difficult position. And in that case, you saw the judge saying, you really have complied with all bail guidelines. In fact, I should have released you on bail. But in the last two paragraphs, say, because of the gravity of the offense, I can't give you bail. That is a result of this situation where the courts are now under immense pressure. You have judges who are on acting capacity, do not have the independence and the security of tenure to be able to make tough decisions. And that is what leads us here. But the last thing is this. I think that we are experiencing our Rivonia trial moments. If you're familiar with the Rivonia trials,
Nelson Mandela,
where activists came to the conclusion that justice was at odds with legality, and that therefore the courts became a site of the struggle, not a place they sought justice. Because they viewed their trial, the prosecutorial decisions to take them for arraignment, as an act of political confrontation as opposed to a genuine crime being tried. And people then go to court and use that platform as a space for advancing whatever struggle they're involved in. That sort of atmosphere creates a lot of tension in the court system. From the judges to the prosecutors, people are really, really very tense. And in our case, in Aaron Kiza's case, we took the difficult decision to decouple the activists' approach to litigation from the actual pursuit of justice. And when we did that, we found some minimum success. But in many cases where you have a real contestation between the prosecutors and the accused persons view the prosecutors as acting in bad faith, as being partisan, as being vindictive. And then the accused persons come to court not to seek justice, but to use that platform as a place for activism. You then lose the debate about what is actual justice. And I think for me, we have to have a moment of reflection. Because as a lawyer, I can't be like Mandela's lawyer, who went to court and described Mandela as a minister for defense for the incoming government. And never really thought about even trying to make the case for his innocence. And so, in our case, we decouple that process with our pursuit for justice, much to the chagrin of many of our friends.
Perhaps including Aaron Kiza, because he sees himself as an activist lawyer.
The client himself, when he called us in prison and asked us to get him out of prison,
by any means
possible, at least accepted to take legal advice from us. And we told him, we are going to be your lawyers, you're going to take our advice. If you can't take it, please find somebody else to do your case. And so he agreed that we should find a legal, lawful means to get him out of prison, as opposed to the apology that he was being asked to make. And so we did that, and we got him out. The point, Oscar, is that every actor in that space has a responsibility for why we end up in this sort of situation. And perhaps it's a moment to reset. From the from investigations to prosecutorial decisions to the way we prosecute these kind of cases, do not really give anybody confidence in the justice system.
Howard Mesiba, today we have a young lawyer in you, on gang. The senior himself is in the studio. Welcome to the Capital Gang, Abdul Katontu. And this time the senior will speak last on the matter.
Thank you. I'll apply for bail.
In the legal profession, the seniors speak first.
In fact, as I've said, for this time he will speak last because he's been speaking for a while. Bail. Yes. Were you surprised Nicholas Opio says he was not surprised that Aaron Kiza's 20 million. But are you, as a young person coming into the profession, are you surprised by how we handle bail in Uganda?
Yes, of course I'm very surprised, but not shocked.
Shocked.
Yes, I'm surprised, but not shocked. Because as my senior colleagues have mentioned, for me, I think that whereas my specialty is in environmental law, I've also seen environmental activists imprisoned. And actually, Aaron Kiza has a niche in environmental activism with his organization called the Environment Shield. So for me, I think that because governance is overarching, we must be concerned generally with the governance question in our country. We must make Uganda work for all Ugandans. I think it was must have been Councillor F. Mpanga who was saying that we need to develop a nervous system where we are able to feel each other's pain. And that's very important, right? So I think when we get into the question of the amount of money that is for bidding, so I can say, okay, I've given you the latitude to apply for bail, but you have to pay 20 million. And the scenario that Agatha alluded to, of 72 million, and you can't afford it literally. So it's now up to you to look within in your family or friends, right? So why that might not even be a win, it's like you've had to buy it. So the right to apply for bail is no longer a right to apply for bail. You have to technically buy it. Right? So at the point where you have to buy it, because if you're paying such exorbitant amounts of money, then it's not a right you have. It's like something foreign or something extrinsic that you're trying then to purchase for yourself. So I think for me, when courts are weaponized, and I think it was one of our professors at Mackay University, Professor Oloka Onyango, and of course, it's a household name, wrote a very interesting book on when courts do politics. Going back all to the 1966, these are things we've discussed here, have had being discussed at the Capital Gang, to the question of, ex parte matovo, and how eventually, I think even with JPAM, on the Public Order Management Act. So you make laws without realizing that at one point you're going to be on this other end. Right? And that's why I'm very surprised. I've also seen parliamentarians, supporting the president, because the president will never be subject to bail. At least according to the safety valves we have in the Constitution, we don't have any. You cannot even imagine the president being subject to bail. So he might not be able to understand what that, the quest for personal liberty matters. As Councillor Nicholas mentioned, anyone in prison or incarcerated would desire freedom. And you see, freedom, when you have it, you take it for granted until you don't have it. And you can remember the time when we were in the lockdown, and people who never even used to go for jogging somehow found that, okay, now we need to pay attention to our health. And then they would go, you see the Northern Bypass, people just, and you're wondering, where have these guys been? Have they just woken up talking, now we need to be healthy? But it was just the quest for freedom of I can get out of home and come back, right? And that's a fundamental right, the right to personal liberty.
The former president of South Korea had never known that you would need bail, but it has happened to that president.
Yes, exactly. But you see, it's hard to imagine a president or a head of state who has, constitutional immunity actually, appreciating. Yes. Yes. You see? So, for me, I think that when anyone's...
Have you had a chance to talk to Kale Kayura, Nicholas?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
We have met, we have had a discussion, we have had disagreements. I now sympathize with him, but his actions in public office had to be examined.
You're very generous.
Yeah, so Oscar, as I conclude, I think that the right to personal liberty is the bedrock for all others, right? Because if you do not have the latitude to exercise any of your rights, then there's no point in them. So when any member of the public is faced with such circumstances and their right to personal liberty is being infringed, then I think we have a moral responsibility as advocates, we have a moral responsibility as members of the community to defend that right. Because if that person's right is infringed, it sets a precedent for all other subsequent infringements. Because if Councillor Nicholas Opio's right to personal liberty is infringed, it shows that it's possible. And if the context in which it is infringed is not questioned, if the perpetrators in that regard are not brought to book, then there is no guarantee, there's no assurance that any other person, myself inclusive, will not again be subjected to the same kind of treatment. So I think it's alarming, but also speaks fundamentally to the governance crisis we have in this country. And we must reflect critically on how we can make Uganda work for all Ugandans.
Angelo.
Yes, Oscar.
On bail.
Well, there are a couple of things to be said about this issue of bail. Nicholas and I work together in the same organization, I think now over 10 years, Chapter 4 Uganda. And we have discussed more broadly what he referred to, as to look at this issue in the context of the justice system writ large. But you see, the essential idea behind bail is to support that cardinal rule that everyone who's accused is presumed innocent. Okay, but and that punishments handed down by the courts must be after a process of a fair and impartial trial. So bail is really intended to create those objective conditions to allow an accused's guilt or innocence to be determined by a judicial process we also assume to be, fair and impartial. And that also includes what is generally said but perhaps not practiced in the country, that justice delayed is justice denied. Now, people like Joe Oloka and others have done some thinking around this, but as Opio said, there's been no proper resolution. So, if you ask, is the penal system in Uganda delivering justice? The answer would generally be no. Because, and I see Abdi is looking at me, but the whole idea behind penal justice is reform and rehabilitation. Okay? But I think the scales are weighted on the side of punishing those who might be accused. And I've seen very little in the last 20 years, for example, to develop forms of reform, outside the penal system. Like, can you go and do community service, for example, for minor offenses? The jails, on the other hand, because of the problem with our commuter system, are filled to the choking point, I think, by about a factor of 400%, and in my interactions with the prison authorities over the tenure of at least 2 commissioners general, we have complained to them not about the conditions in the jails, which are overflowing, but also that they must join the rest of us in trying to decongest those jails. The process in the government to decongest those jails, I feel, has not yet. It's at the center of it, colleagues, is that there is no sense of urgency around this idea of the presumption of innocence. even if this is the basis of our, of constitutional justice, that someone is assumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Now, I think in conclusion, perhaps that, the jury society, the judges and the judicial system and the bar must really think about these preeminent conditions in Uganda. What Opio referred to as the tension, with the political actors. My sense is that they are focused on law and order, and therefore rule by law, not rule of law. There is a sense that the only way you can hold the country together is to exercise some kind of extreme control over citizens. Maybe the political system is not providing breathing room for society to be much more empathetic and much more willing, to accept that some people, they make mistakes. When they make mistakes, if they are grave mistakes, we can punish them with a jail sentence after a trial. But if you look at all the misdemeanors, minor offenses, and especially the age of the country, where these offenses are to be expected, like this period we are in, leading to an election, there's always a rise in the jails, the jail population, by almost a factor of 18% in some periods. So we know, but we need to
18% even seems low.
Yeah, well, in the last election, actually, surprisingly, the number of arrests were not as high, but maybe because the person Opio was referring to was no longer heading the police. But when he was in charge, there was a real, uptick in the jail population.
But the level of brutality, so the justice was meted out on the street. The level of brutality was higher.
So anyway, to conclude, Oscar, I think, if you look at it from the perspective of society, the age of the country, the aspirations of the next generation, the bench must be a place where we can adjudicate what are the real Ugandan values, and not just, go through this administrative straitjacket that has been imposed, like Joe Loka said, as a result of the relationship between the political class and the judicial class.
Ofwono Opondo on bail, recently was amusing. You were not around, but a former Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, advised his client not even to seek bail because he saw the weather outside. And he said, from the way I'm seeing the weather outside the court, we are not going to apply for bail for you.
Yeah, but you remember that same person, when he was still Deputy Attorney General, what he told the Justice Catherine Bamgemeri. And I think that's what Howard was saying. When you're in charge, you see things differently. But I think, Oscar...
Very true.
I think, Oscar, we need to look at the contradictions in society. I remember in 86, when... Don't accuse me of starting my story with the 86. At that time...
It's a tradition for all of you.
The NRC thought that corruption, defilement, and things like that were serious offenses. And they enacted a law that if you commit those offenses, you are charged. They gave 480 days, I think so, if my recollections are good, before you could be before you could consider applying for bail and be granted. When we promulgated the 1995 Constitution, that was changed immediately. I think the motion was moved by El Karhanga, who said this now contradicts the Constitution. And then the court system became liberal with bail. I want to disabuse Nicholas's view, that assertion that these matters are being, first of all, only political. No, it is not just political. Even other offenses. And I think this is what happens when you give people wide discretion under the cloth of independence of the police, the discretion of the police to investigate, you can see what they are doing with arresting people, suspects. You can see what they are doing with the bond. Even when we have the 48, but the police is abusing the discretionary powers. And I think I also have matters before courts. I think judges, magistrates, presiding officers are abusing that thing, the independence and discretion. And I think that's where all this stems from. And it's not just bail. I think maybe we would have time to discuss the hidden costs of seeking justice in the Uganda court system. Because it's not just bail.
Yeah.
Look at just having your matter fixed, allocated to a judge or a magistrate, and the time in and out, adjournment. And a matter which you think is simple takes you 7 years. Look at that cost. That every 2 weeks, because somehow they have said every 2 weeks you go back. Look at that cost. Leave the bail.
7 years and the person isn't working.
The hours you lose in production and productivity. And I thought that could be addressed by a joint session of the judiciary, prosecution, law society, and in some instances these days we have a meeting point between the president and the chief justice. I think these are matters that can be raised in that forum and they are resolved. The second one, Opio says, is acting judges. These exorbitant costs, bail, and even at the end of judgment when you see costs, it's not just by acting judges who Opio says have
no
fear,
tenure.
Fear that probably I will not be confirmed. No. Even the judges who are on permanent and pensionable. Look at what's going on in court in election petitions. Look at the huge variance of the time delay, an election matter that the Abdus now had to come and say you must attend to election petitions within this time. But initially, you remember the case of Abudu here. Namboze, where election petition took 3 years. And look at the awards that vary so much from one judge to another, one case to another. So it is not just acting judges. It is not just political faces of the Kizza messages, the errors. No. I think the judicial officers are abusing the independence and discretion. And that's where probably I support my young friend, the table banger, that maybe this judiciary needs a shock therapy. No, not just once, but we need to calibrate in such a way that maybe for the next 3 years, we are on the case of the malignancy in the judicial system, particularly the way magistrates and judges handle
the Tebobanga has been curtailed.
No, I don't even understand why. I think Mr. Semakade should return. He's taken in for his 2 years and then he battles. Yeah, like Aaron has done. I don't think hiding the way he's doing is the best way. He should come and we confront this animal we see as abuse of judicial power. You know, I don't think hiding is a good thing. So, for me, I think it is not just bail, but it's the entire system. And so, I was a journalist before. Then I went to I was investigation. Actually, I was Chief Investigations Officer for the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Yes. And I was given task, particularly in northern Uganda. And that time we define northern Uganda to start from Moroto up to what is now Zombo. During the time of the war, 96, 2000. That was the time I was there as investigations officer. And yes, and I opened prison cells inspection almost every month. I made reports. I caused the dismissal actually of a number of prison officers. I opened the detention facilities of UPDF. I opened detention facilities of the Uganda police. And you could go to a prison and you find somebody who has 5 years, is on remand, has never been brought
to court.
Even today, if you try to cross-check, if we are thorough, you will find people who have been charged in court, yes, and for either because of the sloppiness, the laziness in the judicial system, their cases are not brought, or because of logistical reasons. The prison authorities say we have no transport to bring this aspect, even when matters are called. And so I think there are many things that need to be addressed, not just bail. And when we focus on the high-profile political people, we lose track of the people who have no voice and are facing worse situations. Yes, Kiza messages case, Aaron Kiza attracts attention, but there are people who are not of that level who are going through worse things in that judicial system.
Yeah. The way Agatha is looking at you and for the first time with admiration, stressing the first time.
Agatha is a young person, doesn't know.
I interviewed you for the first time in 2008. So I thought you had started at plot, whatever. What plot is that?
Plot 1.
Plot 10.
Yeah.
Plot 10.
Yeah.
Young person. But also,
I must also confess, when I was inviting you to the show today, I thought I was inviting an NRM, but I'm saying maybe I made a mistake and I needed to invite an NRM person.
Actually, NRM.
It is the true NRM.
NRM.
He's still NRM.
NRM stands for Open, Transparent Accountability of Individual Power and Government Power.
Oscar, he said that the judicial officers are abusing the independence. Where is the independence in the first place? Which independence has the NRM given judicial officers?
That's why I said there's now a meeting point between the judicial people and the executive. Now, if you're a judge, if you are a chief justice, and you fear to tell the president and the Speaker of Parliament, because they meet 3 of them.
Or the president gives you calls to tell you how to decide.
Then I think you are not worth being a judge. If you fear to do
Abdu, you've been telling them to resign if you don't want to be a judge.
Would you be hanged? Would you be hanged? Would you have Justice Kania? Justice Kania, who you are quoting. I have seen you are harassing her on social media.
I'm not harassing her. I'm just writing
Kania,
facts.
I also think is wrong, singling her out, because so can any judge say, I have made this decision because I fear to be hanged? Okay, if the president or the government, the executive is going to hang you, why not accept to be hanged? Why not resign?
Oh, we're going to stop for a break.
If you think
I agree with you.
If you think that the atmosphere is so toxic that cannot allow you to exercise the independence that you swore to uphold, why don't you resign? Then that means maybe we'll have people.
Let us stop for a break first. But judges. I'd like to welcome Abdu before the break. Welcome to Gang.
Thank you, Oscar, and don't give any question.
No. I said earlier that you have last word. Don't forget I said earlier that you'd have last word.
Thank you very much, Oscar.
Yeah. Welcome to the Capital Gang. We've been discussing bail And seeing that we have a senior in the studio.
No, I just wanted to conclude.
Before you conclude, let me tell listeners, we've had a few issues on the online platforms, but they've been sorted. But you can just go to Capital FM Uganda. We have a space here that's running, and you'll have excellent access.
Yeah.
Conclude.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't like to call people by the English names. And in the case, Opio is actually a twin, so it's already a title. So Opio. Opio says acting judges. What does our constitution say about the tenure of a judge and process of removal? It is so difficult. The president cannot wake up and fire. The cabinet cannot wake up and fire. It requires appointment of a commission of inquiry of friendly people. In our cases, we sometimes even don't have the money to start off that process. So any judge, any person who's pleading for them on account that they are fearing for their tenure is being disingenuous.
I think the distinction must be between a judge appointed and approved on a permanent basis. That judge is difficult to remove. There's a whole protracted process. But a judge appointed on acting capacity, what is really probationary judges, really that instrument of appointment, the final one, he's signed by the president.
Yeah.
And the case of Justice Bukirwa really exemplifies the problem of acting judges.
No.
That on account of a decision you make, no one likes it, they don't send your name for final approval. So you then don't appear on the list.
But as you know, it was renewed. But also, would you make the same argument for members of parliament whose term is 5 years? But you can see the lousiness with which some of them, even when they know, they have statute of tenure. So really, I think let us not use that, because then we are shifting the blame and saying, because they fear the president, they fear this. No. People must have the spy.
But even the president interferes with their decisions. Isn't that true?
Ladies and gentlemen, let's try and get up into this
the objective
discussion.
reality, or the practical objective reality, is that judge is waiting for final instrument of appointment. And without that instrument, in 2 years, you could simply be on the street. And so it has its own implication
if they
on
don't
exercise of judicial power.
Can't you go and wear that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or go to your private chamber?
Abdul, well before all this, because high-profile cases have brought this issue of bail, but you've been shouting about it. But first, put the record right. Is acting judge a lawful position?
Need this to do more.
There is an active matter in the Supreme Court in and I always want to restrain myself commenting about matters that are active in court. We need to give...
What matter is that?
That very question you've asked, yes.
Okay.
At the Constitutional Court level, it was held that it was unconstitutional, but then the matter has been appealed to the Supreme Court. Let's see.
Right.
I hope it's not one of those cases that's going to take another 15 years before we have a decision.
Well, you know, law has been trending. This week, there was a definition of a woman in the UK courts. Now that is clear.
Yes.
It took courts to define a woman.
That's it. But, Oscar, to go back to the subject of the conversation, throughout my short time in Parliament, I've... I have tried to...
Relative to...
People have been in power for almost 40 years.
I've tried to really fight for the judiciary. And I've tried as much as possible to be polite, to have private conversation with judicial officers I know, and raise concern. But you reach an extent where you have to burst out. Because you see, we cannot afford to have a system that does not produce quality of justice. And we are busy thinking this is our last line of defense. Once the court system is destroyed, we are in trouble as a country. And it doesn't matter who Because, and I agree with the OO, it's only the last statement he has just made that we're about to spoil the whole morning when he had started, he had started on well. It's not about cases which have got political connotations, but we're talking about real cases of people, whether in capture, we're talking about Arua, who are not politicians. One of the most professional people you'll ever find is somebody called Dr. Vyavashaja, the Commissioner General of Prisons. But he's faced with a task, and I don't know how he handles it. Most professional people. One of the most professional people. If you really must judge him, fairly and really without any biases. He is so good, but these people just continue throwing people there with their remand warrants, and they don't prosecute them. You find, like a month ago, there was a committee that went to Luzira and found somebody who had been on remand for more than 15 years. So what is the purpose of bail? What is the purposes of trial? The Constitution guarantees, one, a fair trial, speedy and fair actually. But if you have been on remand for 15 years, you've served your sentence before trial. So, and these judges, a few of them were talking to me after my outburst, and they were like, how can it be you? And I'm like, guys, by the time I speak that way, just know there's a big problem. And I hope they listen. Because the country is bleeding. How can somebody be on remand for 15 years? What justice is this? 15 years. But because he's not a politician, he's not a prominent lawyer like Kiza, he's not a doctor. Oh, they are all Kizas. He's not a doctor, Vesige, or the other Kiza. Then the press, the social media is not picking it. She's a woman in a West Nile there, suffering in a prison without trial for 5 years, 6 years. Then the other issue I was raising with the judiciary, and Nicholas knows this, is a practicing lawyer. You go to a court and the judge says, I'll give you a judgment or notice. So you walk away not knowing when the judgment will come. So what they do, they start going to the clerks. Have you peeped there? Have you seen my file? He went with it. Is it right? I don't know. And once you have that sort of conversations, then very many unethical things can happen. Maybe the judge wants something. Then the clerk is also blackmailing litigants, they're blackmailing lawyers. But we have a problem, Oscar. Lawyers so scared, practicing lawyers, are so scared of talking about the judiciary because they think there are repercussions. So to me, a person when I'm in an advantaged position, yes, I do a little bit of practice, but I'm more in politics. And if I don't use the platform I have to speak truth to them, then who will? And I hope they listen. I really hope they listen. But the good news is, there's one person I know, and I know him very well, is the Honorable Chief Justice. He doesn't fear criticism. That you can get. The Honorable Chief Justice Owinyo does not fear criticism. So you can criticize him and so on. He would not get offended. He is a tough debater, can defend his tough and so on, but he will not fear debate and he will not be offended. So when we are talking like this, for us, we know the man we are talking to, that he has this thing cut out. In any case, he's about to retire. And I want him to retire and say, look, these are the milestones. When I was Chief Justice, this is what I achieved. One of them, during the time of Bart Katreva and his, we have seen the expansion of courts system. We've recruited so many judges. Even the infrastructure has increased. They are now the best paid civil servant, as a government servant, maybe on the continent, on the whole of Africa. Yeah. And not only about their monthly, but even in retirement. we are looking after them even in their retirement. They go with a brand new car. They go with a brand new house. They take 80 to 100% of what they have been earning. So what more would a judge have to? He doesn't have to be corrupt. And when we talk about corruption, Oscar, it's not about bribes alone. But if you decide a case not based on the facts and the law before you, then you are corrupt. And that's what we are complaining about. You can't continue sending people to jail, actually punishing them. Then you say, well, I've punished you, but after 5 years, I say you are free. You committed no offense. It doesn't make sense. And what's your name again? Howard says, now bail is for buying. Literally. I mean, this is insanity. Why should anybody buy bail? And that was, they have monetized the bail.
In fact, Nicholas said he's not surprised about the high amounts.
No, it's wrong. Well, let me tell you, Oscar, a little bit of jurisprudence. Bail is, first of all, on the presumption of innocence.
Yeah.
That's number. Number two, to deny somebody that presumption, then you must, as a court, exercise that discretion judiciously. Keeping this in mind, will the accused come back and stand trial or not? Two, will he interfere with the investigation or not? Once basically you are satisfied of those two, the others are minor consideration.
But just, that doesn't fly, interference. Must you be out in order to interfere? Because you can even interfere when they have denied you bail and you're in jail.
No. Let me make. You see, it is not about you assuming. There should be evidence before you, as a judicial officer, that this accused most likely is going to interfere, and there should be facts raised by the prosecution, the ones who are applying to deny you bail. There should be evidence. There should be facts. So, by the way, he has been there before and he has done ABCD. So he has that history. So it's not about the judge assuming in his mind that this one, I think, being a cartoon, we must go. That doesn't sail. It doesn't at all. So, Oscar, if we don't talk about it publicly, then we have a problem. It will continue. You call it a malignant. Yeah, it will continue, eating us up as a society. So, judges, those who are listening to us, good enough. By the way, I've had several conversations with many of them. Some actually are very, very annoyed with what is going on. I had the benefit of looking at their exchanges on their groups. Sometimes if you are many, say, by the way, this is what is going on, and so on. So there are many who are not happy. They think something is fundamentally wrong. And if those who are guilty are listening in, the whole country is looking at you, and we deserve better as a country.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners. Agatha, I want to say...
because, we talked about...
Go to the microphone.
Pre-trial detention, and I wasn't sure of the duration. So the Magistrates Courts Act talks about 480 days for a case, for a charge that carries a death sentence. We no longer have those that mandatory death sentence. So that means you would use the latter, which is any other offense. That's 240 days pre-trial detention, after which someone has to get mandatory bail. But we have people, so maybe people like the person Abdul mentions, who has been in prison for 15 years without I think maybe those have not applied for bail, but we have those that have even continued applying and they have not been given bail for 4 years. So that's far exceeds the 240 days. We have been talking about the NUP supporters, the group that was with Olivia Otaya, so the 9 that refused that amnesty, if you can call it that. And those guys have been in jail for over 4 years now. Their bail has been denied over 4 times. Their lawyer, George Musisi, can tell you all the ridiculous reasons they have given. And this Magistrates Act says a magistrate before whom this charge was brought, if 240 days pass, dismiss that case, let them be out. But it does not happen in this country. I agree with OO on the one hand, because I have actually been saying this, that people should take personal responsibility. We have judges before that have been faced with these political cases and have stood up against, stood by the law. Because when we're talking about the independence of the judiciary, I would say, the law gives them that. So what is the problem? The security of tenure that they were talking about, it is true. If a judge is doing something, it's not fear for being fired. It's fear for not being promoted. And I don't think we should extend grace to someone that says someone should be in jail for 15 years because they fear to be promoted. I mean, to stay at high court level. But that's also a problem. When you go back to Ofwono Opondo's boss that promotes people because of loyalty and whatever other considerations, so that we cannot run away from that as well. That if you allowed people an environment where they know that I am promoted on merit, not because I have, released someone that they don't want me to release. And for me, you had OO saying that he's seen me harass Judge Kanya.
A judge.
I have not. I think all we do, and in journalism we do that, profile people, is profile someone. This is who this person is, this is her background. Let the decisions they make, good or bad, make sense. I mean, people will have context. So that's what I've done, and I think that it is important that people who are taking these decisions that are affecting lives and livelihoods should know that the public will use whatever little power they have remained with to hold them accountable. Yes. The presumption of innocence is what we should have maybe started with. Yeah. That's the basis for bail. Because you have Kizza Besigye. You have Kizza Besigye who has been arrested hundreds of times but has never been convicted. So that person, and this is what Abdu was saying about how the consideration of interference with the case. So you have this person who has been arrested many times and charged and given bail and has never interfered. At least you haven't produced any evidence that all those times he has ever interfered with the investigations. But now you're just assuming, and we should be okay with that even prosecution never brought any facts before us or evidence that this person is capable of doing that, but you can come to a conclusion that we should be okay that, I think there is a problem with the judiciary, the custodians of justice, where if everything fails, they are the people we run to, but in this country, it's not the case anymore.
Yeah. It's a good discussion we've had.
Well, I don't think, sometimes we need to point out where there are problems. Sometimes it's not good to say, in this country, we don't have that. I think there are judges out there. We must really congratulate. They have done their best. They are
actually
judicial officers of integrity and really. Sorry,
I was saying was just on that point because I was discussing the ruling that the judge made in the Aaron Kizza case. And I think it's a very futuristic ruling. If you see how the judge constructed his argument, first of all, he basically says if you come to seek justice, a judge must offer that justice, even if there are other issues involved. That is, I think, at the primary level. And then he talked about the inherent jurisdiction. Basically, the court has powers. Okay, and he defined those, and then he went ahead to exercise those powers. So apart from the bail conditions, I think that particular judgment
it was a brilliant
really good judgment.
It was a brilliant ruling, I must say.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying those who are focusing on the money missing the
jurisprudence, the quality of that ruling, the arguments raised.
Very good.
And average lawyer will really appreciate it.
But you should also appreciate us for making the argument before the court.
He could have disagreed with you.
Maybe because the client was asked for 30 because Opio had he works with the 10,000.
10,000.
So yes, it is important, but sometimes we lose out on the bigger picture. And there are many people,
let him pay.
because the High Court is a court of record. It sets precedents, and I see that ruling, coming up to guide other courts on many issues.
Allow me to
it was
go
quite
to
brilliant.
Howard Mesigo, because when I invited him, it was floods in Kampala that were on my mind. You penned an article on those floods. Very quickly, what is the summary of the article?
Right, thank you so much, Oscar. So the gist of the article is really the governance crisis we have in this country. So one might wonder, but I mean, we're talking about the environment. What would governance have to do with the environment? So there's what we call environmental governance. And that goes to the heart of how we're actually implementing policies in this country. We have very good laws, as you might know, Oscar and the viewers, but the question of implementation. And the question of floods is like seeing someone vomiting, and you're like, oh, why are they vomiting? So that is like a sign of a greater or a grander problem. So we have said many a time, and I've disagreed with some of my senior colleagues when they call scenarios like these, like floods, and they say these are natural disasters. I've disagreed with them. Why? Because some of these extreme weather events are not natural, and there's nothing natural about them. These are completely man-made. And let me begin. I just want to unpack this so we get to understand it well. So there's the global imperative on climate change and climate action. So there's that global contribution from historical and legacy emitters like China, like the US, among other countries, right? But there's the climate change that is induced locally here. And you find that in Uganda, the major causes of climate change is not industrialization, as we've seen in the global north. The major causes of climate change locally here in Uganda is deforestation, the encroachment on swamps, but also the sort of unplanned kind of urbanization that we have. Because Uganda has such a fast-growing population, I think it's about 3.2% from the recent impugned statistics we have from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. Yes.
The adjective is not necessary, but continue.
Are you disagreeing with me on that?
No. Please continue.
Yes, they're impugned.
No, it's not the point for discussion.
But all seems to disagree, and I want to take him on that.
No, not the time.
Okay, be that.
Does he even know them? Do you know them all?
Not the time.
No, please. Be that as it may. So, Oscar, the point I'm making is this, and to the viewer and to the listeners, that we have the global contribution from the global north countries, the historical emitters, but in Uganda the major causes of climate change are actually locally induced. And I've mentioned the deforestation. Actually, up till last year, I think the deforestation cover had reduced till about 9%. Can you imagine? So we if you've read the My African Journey, one of the books I really enjoyed reading by Sir Winston Churchill, he had a journey to Africa, came to Uganda. It's said that he was, I think, in Munyonyo in 1907, and then when he returned in 1908, he wrote his book My African Journey, and that is the book in which he said when he came to Uganda, he had not seen any country like Uganda. The beauty, the biodiversity, right? That the warmth of the people, that there was no one who was poor. And then he said that this indeed is the Pearl of Africa. But if he had seen the gold in Karamoja, I'm sure he would still have had the same opinion, right? So the point I'm making is this: if Churchill were to come back today to Uganda and see the state of Kampala, the capital, which is the capital of the Pearl, so there's the Pearl of Africa, then there's the Pearl of Africa, which is supposed to be Kampala, right? And looking at the kind of chaos there is in Kampala, would he still call Uganda the Pearl of Africa? Nonetheless, we go to the grander problem on environmental governance.
Yes.
So in the Constitution, as I mentioned, under Article 39, we have the right to a clean and healthy environment. It's probably the shortest you'll find in the Constitution. It's just one line. Every citizen has the right to a clean and healthy environment, full stop. There's nothing more said about that. So the rest of what that really constitutes, we have to find in principal legislation and also subsidiary legislation. And so principal legislation, these are acts of parliament, the ones that are enacted by Honorable Katuntu and the rest of the legislators. And we'll go to the National Environment Act, we'll go to the National Climate Change Act, as I mentioned, and then of course the regulations we have, for example, the National Environment Waste Management regulations of 2020, the National Environment Wetlands, Riverbanks and Lake Shores regulations of 2000, and then we get into some of the bylaws that are made by KCCA. So the challenge is that we have the laws, but even the awareness of these laws, Oscar and the listeners, is something that we need to take very seriously, because we can have the laws, but for us to inspire the implementation of these laws, we need to get the citizens to understand the imports, but also the content, the substance of these laws, the safety valves that are embedded in these laws, but also how they can hold duty bearers accountable through these laws. And that's very important. I recently saw a footage on X of a young man who was dumping garbage. I think it was even raining in a stream, I think in a trench, and then eventually he was arrested. I would like to tell you, Oscar, and to the listeners, that this is not an isolated incident. We know it happens. It was just this one time where this one was recorded and then eventually brought to book. But we know that people in Kampala, the moment it rains, they just open their sewage tanks and everything, and yes, no one cares, right? But you see, Oscar, the challenge we have is that we seem to speak so much about these things, and I've even had and people in government talk about we need to have a resilient Kampala infrastructure. But when it comes to the question of budgeting, you see, Oscar,
just pause there for a second.
Yes.
We go for a break and then we'll continue the discussion. Welcome back from the break. This is the Capital Gang. In a break, we had a chance to be inspired and sparked up by Howard Mwesigwa's comments on the impunity. But we have a shorter time for discussion. I interrupted you as you were concluding.
Yes. So thank you so much, Oscar. So summarily put, the challenge we have with the flooding in Kampala, you can look at it in so many aspects, in so many ways. But the causes, in my assessment, and because this is my specialty, I specialize in environmental law and policy, the illegal developments and encroachments on drainage reserves. It's critical. The filling of wetlands and the low-lying areas with soil for industrialization. We've seen this here. And we've even seen titles being created in wetlands. Can you imagine? Land titles being created out of a glaring wetland. And the challenge that I've seen is even in the enforcement, when NEMA finally wakes up, then they go for the urban poor. But we know we've seen big industries being constructed in wetlands in Kampala here, and they're blocking even the drainage channels, but nothing is being done. So that is an injustice. If you're going to go for the big shot and create a precedent that if you can go for this industry, this factory, then what about you, a normal citizen? So there should be that kind of equity and justice in enforcement of laws. But then the other, Oscar and the listeners, the poor waste management practices in our country. We've had a major waste management crisis. Think about what happened in Chitezi.
Yeah.
Right?
Sad.
What has been done about it, Oscar? What has been done about it? We're not talking about floods. We are waiting for more landslides in eastern Uganda and more floods in western Uganda. But what has been done about it, Oscar? We need to be serious. We need to hold duty bearers accountable. And in that article, Oscar alluded to Klima Signoren versus Switzerland, where a whole country, Switzerland, was held accountable for not doing enough to protect its citizens from the impacts of climate change. And I'm saying, Oscar, and you can put me on record, that there's a looming litigation matter against the AG and KCCA for negligence in Kitezi, but also with all these different disasters we are seeing. One day like this, Oscar, you revert to this recording, because we can only take enough, Oscar. We can only take. We have the.
Are you a table banger?
Oscar, please. Don't. You want me to go to exile? You see, I'm telling you, Oscar.
To employ the language.
No, he's not
He's not the master of banging tables.
No, I'm a diplomat, Oscar.
But
I'm telling you. My final sentence, Oscar. We have the Kampala Drainage Master Plan of 2017. Actually, it was given a wide span all the way till 2060. Right? And at present, of course, the budget for it is about $120 million US. In the short run, about $49 million US. In the medium term, about 140. But then, of course, extending in the longer run till 2060 to about $17 million US. And at that time, it will just be maintenance. But I tell you, there's been budget shortfalls on that. That's why I was taking on it. That if you say this is a priority for you, even in NDP4, we have said that resilience. We've talked about the ATMs, agro industrialization, the mineral wealth. We've talked about tourism and even science and technology. But we also say that we're going to look at building Uganda's resilience, even in our green growth strategy. So I think we need to mobilize more resources and be intentional in funding the Kampala Drainage Master Plan.
Okay, hold it there.
Yes.
We'll get you back on conclusion. Abdu, floods, we had a long dry season, and people complained about the dry season, and that would have been a good opportunity to sort out the drainage, because it was clear that the rains would come.
Yeah, it was clear.
What Ofwono Opondo did, he went and did gardening and all, because he knew the rains would come.
Yeah. It may not be as simple as my young brother here puts it. First of all, I am so much impressed that he knows his stuff, and he's so articulate. He puts his case, far better. But Howard, there is now an international crisis. But let's limit our argument for Uganda's sake. The land as it is here is not elastic. The population is increasing. Pressures on utilization of this land can only increase. We have to build, because you need to house more people. You have to do more agriculture, because you need to feed more people. But the land remains the same. If we don't utilize that land responsibly, then the crisis will be there. So there's going to be a little bit of competition with nature, actually, because you need land, you need to build. But how do you build? I think that's the most important thing. And you people, you just don't know where the problem is. Look at our national budget. How much have we put in for purposes, forget about those other institutions, but for purposes of national fiscal planning? Who sit on that board, and what do they do? Zero. They just have the budget to have their salary. Only. I mean, it's a joke. Yeah? For occupying those offices. And let me tell you, during the colonial days, just whether it is Arua, Fort Polo, Kasese, even Moroto and so on, you had all those towns planned, colonial days and Obota one. Look at the so-called towns mushrooming these days. Where are the planners? Just look at these are basics. And because I don't want to speak your sort of language, listeners may not understand some of those things. So I want to reduce ourselves to is and was, so that our listeners follow. We are not doing the correct things correctly. We need the town councils, and we've upgraded the villages, trading center to town councils, municipalities. Actually rebaptized them, but they still remain slums and so on, and they're not being planned. You don't know where there is a Boma, where there is a leisure place, like you used to have golf courses all over, including Moroto. There was a golf course. You get it? Just look at what is going on. Many are reopening, but Boma zero. Oscar,
have golf course roads without the golf course itself.
Please, Oscar, please. I know I used to be chairperson of the local government accounts committee, so I went inspecting all this local government. In Masaka, they have encroached on the golf course they are building. So it's in Mbarara, everywhere. In Ngulu, it's not there. So we can really refocus. Masaka has been fundraising to get it back. We can really refocus on things, including basic manners. During the colonial days, every homestead, and always fond of talking about this, they had what they call a katandal. What is katandal in English? Where you wash plates and Right. Harvard trade is talking about dry racks. So those, you even had the pit latrines, which they are to inspect and do physical visits to see whether you've smoked them and so on.
When these guys came to power.
No, Oscar, this is quite important because let us start with the basic. And then schools, they used to tell us to plant trees. Primary schools. So when you talk about trees and destroying, we need deforestation, there are ways of doing it. But you have a National Forestry Authority, there are beacons and so on. Yeah. Just know how many trees have they planted this year, and you have free human resource. Just go to schools and say very pupil, you have 5 trees, give them.
But this was actually the case when I went to primary school.
Yes. You're on now. I was to do 2 minutes each. You conclude.
I was saying,
and 2 minutes each, because I have about 10 minutes talking about OO.
Okay. So, first, I wanted to share a letter to Cabinet written by Yoweri Museveni in 2021 titled Defending Uganda's Unique Heritage and Nyara. He is very articulate there about, because he looks at the physical geography of the country, the climatic conditions, and he makes a case. And he left it there. So, it is not that people do not know. Like Abdu says, there are just some things that require basic common sense. When I was in primary school, first year in Nakasero Primary, all of these things were duly taught and inspected. Then I went to a small primary school in Moyo called Moyo Town Primary School. And I'm telling you that at home, our homework was precisely that, build the washing areas. We were taught how to do our own manure, how to keep those toilets clean. And these are the first days when the NRM took over. You had those resident district administrators and their teams come to villages to inspect. Do you have a clean toilet? Do you have a toilet? Okay. Do you have a clean toilet? Where are you disposing of your waste? Today, there is just like gross, not just incompetence, indifference, and cynicism, but there's a sense of just to whom it may concern. You go to affluent neighborhoods, you walk through them, and you see people with bags of trash outside their homes. Yeah. What does that have to do with KCCA in the first place? The people who are living there must take responsibility.
Even planting 1 or 2 trees in your own compound.
So I just feel, just to conclude, Oscar, the general approaches we have, okay, are completely there are a contradiction in terms with what is even necessary. Like this decision by the Ministry of Works to say they are implementing an electronic monitoring system for traffic. In God's name, really, just across here, you see 100 violations. The traffic officers have to choose who to hold accountable. How do you implement? How do you even propose such a thing?
Agatha, 2 minutes on flooding and the environment.
So, in October last year, an old woman called Namudu was she was evicted a year earlier, her house demolished in Lubiji, and in October she was, with others, taken to prison. She was in prison for 2 months, 72-year-old. Now, so the problem was encroachment on the wetland, and I think the charge was interfering with lawful orders or something, or disobeying lawful orders. The question, when that happened, everyone was asking, how come Sudir has never been touched? How come Ham Chigundu has never been touched? Do you know where he built on the expressway? Have you seen that outfit there? It's in a wetland. Where his house was that almost flooded. I don't know if it is still there. So after that, we did a wetland, what we called a wetland exhibition.
Since it's not here, I hope these are verified accusations.
Okay, so what do we need to verify? Whether he has a building that is written on even harm in a wetland. It's there. So or whether that is a wetland.
That has to be verified.
Oh, so we need.
You might assume it is.
We need experts to tell us wetland.
But
it might rain.
In that same place, isn't there a petrol station that has been built?
Sorry?
Isn't there a petrol station that has now been built in that area?
Exactly. So there's a petrol station, Starbucks, where they chased those old women. Now you ask yourself. So look at where Forest Mall is, because Uganda, Kampala, most of these places were wetlands, and this is what has created these floods. This is what, because the floods in Uganda are man-made. In Kampala especially, you have drainages that are not working, you have people building in wetlands, you have deforestation, you have all these things that only matter. You don't be shocked if where they chased Namdu, who became homeless and was taken to jail, an investor comes and they give them that land. So someone sent me a message here, and she's an urban planner, and because I think she's listening to this show, and said the biggest problem of floods in this city is corruption. Put that on number one, and the rest that Howard and the rest I've talked about come later, because even the impunity we are talking about is corruption. That who has paid something.
There are some things Abdul will never speak about. But he confronted confrontation at front.
So the biggest problem
about wetlands.
The biggest problem, Oscar, is that,
and he lost that battle.
Is that we are not humanizing this. We are not talking about lives that are lost. Yeah. But one day, someone met me and said they like the work we are doing about corruption, but said, I want you to leave the money bit and go to the life bit. How many lives do we lose because of corruption? If it is because a medical school that is not supposed to be licensed is licensed because of corruption, and how much the damage that does. Look at Tezi. Up to now, we don't know how many people died. Right. We don't know. Me, I always put that figure at 200, at least the modest figure. Yeah, because you had 95 houses gone. It was 7 a.m.
What's the official figure? 45?
No, they keep talking about the bodies that were recovered. They say in 40s, but those that were recovered. And the recovery, because the circumference that was dug out is not even 5% of the entire place. So for me, I think that we need to look at the cost of these things, but also the corruption still comes in that there are no consequences. There are no consequences for people that have done this. Chisaka and 2 others were in prison for a short while, but also I don't think they're the ones that should have been in prison, because the Chitezi disaster started in 2010. The landfill reached its capacity in 2010. How do you know the people that came in office in 2024? How are they the ones that
I met Dr. Okello recently, and asked him about his letter. He said he had so many more letters but we're going to pause this discussion for now, because I wanted to give 10 minutes to a topic called Ofwono Opondo, but now I'll give it 8 minutes. And so, Ofwono Opondo, you want to join these Katuntus. You are going to stand for MP. How will you sit in that parliament? Because they don't like you as much as you don't like them.
I don't like them.
You don't like them much.
No, I disagree with some of the things they do as individuals, as a collective.
So now you want to go there and put them right?
Partly, yes. That would be a contribution, and Abudo has challenged you many times, has challenged the NAMFI, together with Semuja. Actually, they have challenged us. Why do you stand from the outside and you don't want to get inside? We may not like the people occupying the institutions, but that's now the fact of governance. The police is there, the army is there, the civil service is there, the judicial is there, parliament is there. Somebody must do that job. And so I have been having consultations quietly within the NRM and among my friends, and I have come to the conclusion that I have been here for the last 26 years as a spokesperson of NRM, of presidential task forces, of government. And I think the 26 years are sufficient. This Thursday, I wrote to the president, who is my appointing authority, notifying him of the conclusion of my tenure in another 3 months. But now that will be brought forward because probably by 28th, I need to put in my resignation. I have got, I think, from my assessment, good endorsements from my colleagues in the cabinet, in the NRM fraternity, and even the opposition. I have people who are beginning to put money on the table to furnish my campaign. I'm going to run for, if the consultations comes to fruition, because I may not, at the end of the day, decide by myself. I'm intending to run for MP for the elderly because I'm now 61. The law says 60 is eligible. I want to take on my older brother or even father, Mr. Honorable Gidudu Mafabi.
You sure that's your grandfather?
I think it's my grandfather.
It's good your microphone is off.
I'm in it. It's going to be robust.
Okay.
I can certainly say I have what it takes to knock him out. I hope he surrenders before. Yes.
There might be other 60-year-olds that are going to come. But
yeah, that's
congratulations on that move. Abdul, you can wish him well.
No. We've had a conversation about it before. And I can only get excited that we have people who really we can have some discourse, public debate. We agree and also disagree. I am one of the people who convinced Semuju actually to we are quite a number, but I'm one of them. I sat him down and said, look here, in Uganda, the best political group was the Luchiko. The Buganda Luchiko, because that's where the cream of Uganda was. And I was like, in the national parliament, you don't have the sort of people caliber. That cream. Why don't you people who have a little bit of knowledge and experience come and join this fray? And I'm really, really excited that now OO has publicly declared this. Congratulations, my brother. Welcome to the turf.
Yes.
Yeah.
Many people chastise OO, but they don't know him at a personal level. Oscar, my story with OO, he probably doesn't remember. Begins in a shop veranda in Mukono when I was a first-year law student. We would gather there in his social evenings. He would be telling us stories.
Are you sure not social evening nights morning?
And if you listen to him, if you take away the rough edges, he is actually a decent human being. I can only wish him good luck.
Excellent.
I think that he will add a deeper voice of reason. Of course, the NRM ideologue will miss him because he's remained a sole, clear voice and clear-headed individual.
Calls out when it is wrong.
Yeah, he does. So I wish him well, and I will contribute to your campaign, maybe a goat or two.
Before the show started, we were talking, me and Howard, about and Nick about his platform. So I know that he's very clear-headed on matters to do with the elderly. I'm also excited that he's going to focus on healthcare and resilience for people who are in their late stages. You know, as the country is younger and moves closer to the city, a lot of our seniors are left by themselves in the countryside, and that's going to be his focus. So we congratulate him and wish him well.
Agatha.
So we are talking about OO's bid.
Are you contributing anything?
At least on this one you can't.
There's nothing to be nice about. First of all, we've not understood that whole elderly card. What have they done those that are there? Why do we need elder representation for the elderly? When when Abd Katuntu is representing Bugwe, does he remove the elder from that constituency? And no, I'm not saying you are. They used to say it was only women who fear to age, but men of these days. So I'm not saying you're elder. I'm saying that the MPs that are there, the elderly are part of their constituents. If it's not just a plan to keep bloating that parliament and have the Ofwono Opondos to vote on bills that their boss wants, I'm not excited. But please, you can, for it, good for you. Please, thank you.
And conclusion, Miss, our guest concluding on all topics.
Yes,
Harold Mwesigwa.
Yes, thank you so much, Howard Mwesigwa, Oscar. So I want to wish OO the very best.
For the elderly seat.
For the elderly seat, yes, and I hope he will be a good...
You're not like Agatha, who was not impressed.
I mean, we also have youth representatives, nationally, and I mean, they're also represented in, the main. So I think that vulnerable groups need to be given some special representation. So, I wish you the very best, but I also hope you will be able to champion the...
vulnerable.
No, he's representing the elderly that are,
okay.
Where I'm going. Let me go, Oscar.
Yes.
Let me go. Yes. Where I'm going, Oscar, is I'm passionate about climate action, and what climate change does is it sort of exacerbates already existing vulnerabilities without even exempting, the old people, the women, the young people. So I hope all that we can have a conversation after here, how we can be able to champion that cause. But finally, Oscar and our listeners, I think what can be done, especially on the component of the flooding, because that is where my passion really lies, I think that we need to prioritize wetland restoration and avert further encroachment by implementing these laws equitably, both to the big shots, but also to everyone. But I also think we need to upgrade, as a matter of priority, the drainage infrastructure in light of the Kampala Metropolitan Drainage Master Plan. But also, finally, I think that we need to appreciate the whole concept of smart cities and communities in light of SDG number 11, where we look at actually building climate resilient infrastructure and ensuring that we are able to have a Kampala that is smart, sustainable, and climate resilient.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
And write some more. That's where I found you.
Thank you.
So thank you, gangsters of the day.
She's resigning from the media center. That's big news.
Thank you, Star Cafe, for powering the gang. Yesterday we had a big theatrical evening. We had a big theatrical evening at Tiber International School. It was excellent. You read the T-shirt. I thank you, Honorable Katuntu, and wish you a great Easter. Nick Opio, Agatha Atuhaire, Howard Mwesigwa, Angela Izama, Ofwono Opondo. We wish you all the best. We are biased because we are the gang. I am Oscar Semoya Msoke, and I wish you a happy Easter.